Hey guys, welcome to lesson 2.2.1 day 2. We are going to continue with transforming other functions, just give you some more exposure to it. This entire first portion of this note sheet is just for you guys to refer to so you can remember what each parent function looks like on the graph, as well as what each general form looks like for each different kind of function. It's going to make it a lot easier for us to do this work if we have that there to refer to. So our first part of the practice will be to write these equations given a general description. So if we look over here, we're going to check out what our information is in terms of A, H, K, and potential negative signs. So we have here shifting to the right by 2 units, right? This right side movement, that tells us that H is going to equal -2, right? Because H is always opposite. Down by 5. Down and up movement is K, so we have a K value of -5, because down means negative. And we have a stretch, vertical stretch by a factor of 2. Recall that A is in charge of vertical stretches and compressions, so our A value is going to be 2. And this upside down flip is responsible for adding a negative sign to the beginning of our equation. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to do one for every single type of function that we're working with so you can see how they all look compared to each other, even though all the information is the same. Okay, so we start with y equals, and we're just going to follow this format right here for absolute value. So we do A first. Our A is 2, so we'll write that. And now is probably a good time to remember it. You can either remember now or you can remember at the end, but don't forget that we're flipping upside down, which means we need to have a negative at the start of our equation. All right, now we can move on to the absolute value bars. H goes in our absolute value bars. Ours is -2, so that's what we're going to put here. And lastly, we have a K of -5, so -5. Okay, and that's it. You're done with your absolute value equation. All right, moving on to quadratic, the one you guys are already pros at. Okay, again, we need that negative sign up front. A goes first. And with quadratics, we have our parentheses and the squared symbol. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, next comes H. Ours is -2. And our K is -5, so I'll put a -5 on the end here. All right, and that's it for that equation. Just underline these. All right, on to rational. Now, rational is the one that's a little funky compared to what we're used to. That's this guy right over here. So we're still going to follow the format, though. As long as you follow the format, you will be A-okay. All right, y equals. Now, the negative sign still can go up front or at the top of your fraction. It doesn't matter. We could put it up front because that's what we're used to. Now, we have an A value, so A at the top there is going to be 2. At the bottom is our x minus h action, so we'll put x, and then our h is -2, so we'll put a -2. And then our k on the end still, so our -5 will be down here at the end. All right, so that is our full rational function. Moving on to square root. Now we're going to follow this general format. You'll notice that all the general formats are super similar to each other. All right, we still have to put the negative sign up front, still have to put the stretch factor up front, but this time, because it's a square root function, I have to draw a giant square root instead of parentheses. All right, that's where my x and my h are going to go. Okay, my h is -2, so I'll put a -2, and as usual, my k is -5 on the end. I'll put it on the outside here. Please make sure you don't overextend the square root to cover the -5. That would not be correct. Okay, it ends right after h. All right, for my final function, I have a cubic. So we're going to follow the general format right here where it says cubic. Looks exactly the same as quadratic, except it has a third power instead of a second power. So we have our negative sign, an a value of 2, right? My parentheses and my x my cube sign. Next comes h. H was -2. And lastly, -5 for k, so we'll put a -5 on the end here. All right, and that's it. So this way you guys can see that all of these equations are moving and changing by the same exact rules, but because they're different functions, their equations look a little bit different, okay? And while they're different, they still do look similar. All right, next we have something where we get to name all the transformations that are taking place and then also name the function that we're working with. This is just to get some practice, get used to working with these functions. So here, because you see parentheses and a squared, you look up here and you're like, huh, that looks like the quadratic general form. So we will say that this is a quadratic function. Now let's go through and name all of them first. This guy has a square root in it, so obviously it has to be a square root function. This one has a cube, okay? That has a cube, and so it has to be cubic, right? And if you forget that, you can look right up here and be like, huh, which one of these has a cube? And it's this one. All right, this one, it's a fraction. We only have one like that. That's the rational. All right, and this guy has the absolute value bars, so this is going to be absolute value. All right, so let's go ahead and name what transformations are taking place in each of these equations. They each only have one transformation, except this one. This one has two. So here, we have a -1 in the parentheses. This tells us our h value, and so that's telling us that we're moving to the right by 1. Right, this one has a k value, and it's on the outside of the square root. That's how we knew that it was k. So because it's a k value, we are moving up or down. Because it's a plus, we are moving up. So we're shifting up by 3. Here we have a number right in front at the very beginning. That means it has to be our a value. Now, because a is responsible for stretching and compressing, we have a vertical stretch or compression. However, whichever one that is depends on the number itself. Because it's a decimal, it's a number smaller than 1, that tells us it's a compression, right? The numbers bigger than 1 are the stretches. Okay, so we have a compression by a factor of 0.5. Right, this one, you think that there's not a lot going on here, but it does have a negative sign right at the beginning, and that tells us that we have a reflection. So remember that that means it flips. All right, and last here we have an h, and we have a k. That means we have horizontal and vertical movement. +1h means a left shift. We move left by 1, and a -5k means we move down by 5. All right, so that is how we describe transformations. It really is nothing new, really, compared to what we've been doing with parabolas. All right, the last part here, we are now going to be writing equations given the graph. So remember, the way that we want to do that is by first describing the transformations and then using those to come up with the equation. Now remember that each of these graphs has a locator point, and I'm going to be drawing like a little sketch of the parent function to help us remember what we start with so that we can tell easier how we moved. So the black one is the original parent, and the red vertex is the new one. So this tells us that we're moving up by 2, right? And then we move to the left 3. So we can say that we moved up 2, left 3. There's also one last thing that did occur. There was a reflection, right? This one was originally open upwards and this one's downwards. So we have to say that we reflected. Okay, so This tells us, the up tells us that we have a k of 2. Left tells us that we have an h. Now, because it's left and h is always opposite, we have a positive 3. Okay, reflection gives us a negative sign. Oh, my voice is going. All right, so now we can write our equation. We have a negative sign in the beginning. We don't have an a value to worry about, so we can get started on the rest of it. Now, please recall that this is actually not a parabola like we're used to, right? This V-shaped graph, if we look back over here, is the one with the bars, and that is absolute value. So this is a general format that we have to follow. So we're going to have some bars here. X, and then h is positive 3, so I'll do a plus 3. And then k is positive 2, so plus 2 on the end. All right, and then you're done with that one. Next, we have this squiggly guy. The squiggly one, if you look over here, and I'm actually going to write what these are. Okay, this squiggly one, if we go back, we look at the pictures, this is our cubic function. Okay, so we're following this general format. So we're cubic. Okay, and let's talk about the descriptions. Now, our original cubic function looks like this, except nicer. Mine's a little janky, but that's all right. Okay, and our new one is at 2, -1. So the movements that took place was that we moved to the right by 2, right? And then we moved down by 1. So we moved right 2, down 1. Now, because we moved to the right 2, remember left and right movement is always h. So this tells us we have an h of -2. Remember, h is always opposite. If we move right, it's negative. If we move left, it's positive. It's obnoxious, but can't help it. So down 1, up and down movement is k's responsibility. So k is going to be -1. K is not opposite like h is, okay? So down does mean negative, up does mean positive. All right, so now we're ready to write our equation. We have y equals, this one did not flip at all, so we don't have to worry about a negative sign. We could just go ahead and get started with our parentheses. Remember, this is a cubic function, that's why I'm using this general format. My h was -2, so I'll put a -2, and my k is -1, so I'll put a -1 on the end where k goes. Okay, and then we're done with that one. 2 more. So this one, let's look back at our pictures, right? Get a good look at this, look back at our pictures, and we're like, which one of these does that look the most like? Okay, I would hope that you would conclude that it's this guy, which is the square root function. All right, so go to our graph. This is square root. Okay, so my original square root function, the locator point was at 0, 0, and it always looked like this. Okay, now our new one looks like this. So let's talk about what happened here. We started at 0, 0, we moved up by 2, and then we moved to the right by 1. All right, so we moved up 2, right 1. Now again, up and down means you have a k value. It's going to be +2 because we moved up 2. Left and right means we have an h value. Because we're moving to the right, it's going to be negative. I really hope you guys are getting comfortable with the fact that k is not opposite. Okay, k does what your heart wants it to, whereas h does not. Okay, and also, it flipped. Okay, so our equation is y equals, this is a square root function. Because we have a reflection, we have a negative up front. Square root x, and then h goes in there, and then k on the outside, so +2. All right, I'm running out of time with my video recording here, so I won't be able to do this one, but if you want to know exactly how this one works, I'm happy to tell you at another time, but I have to write the answer because my video recorder ran out of time. All right, that's all for today.